The rise of shadows is almost upon us. But are any of these cards good enough for the wild format? In this video, I'm going to give my picks for the best wild Hearthstone cards in Rise of Shadows, as well as share some of the cards that I'm looking forward to most personally.
Watch this!
Hey guys, it's Roffle, and before the Rise of Shadows released, I want to talk about a few of the cards that I'm most looking forward to from this set. For those of you that are new here, my name is Roffle, and I'm a wild Hearthstone streamer. In the past, I took the game a little bit more seriously and was one of the most consistent legend finishers on North America. These days, I just like to have a little bit of fun with the game. First up, let's take a look at some of the best cards from the set. Coming in at number 5, we have Sludge Slurper. This is a 1-mana 2/1 Murloc with Battle Cry, add a lackey to your hand, but it has Overload 1. Now, it's a bit too early to say whether or not the lackeys are going to be strong, but they certainly look to be at first glance. Critically, this card replaces itself in hand and fills out your curve nicely with the Overload effect, so that you're not skipping over turn 2 or having a weak turn 2. In Wild especially, this does have some synergy with Tunnel Trog, but I think it's a strong standalone card. Obviously, with the new expansion, Murloc Shaman got a little bit more support beyond this card, which I think bumps up the value of this particular card. But I think it's just a strong, aggressive minion that you could potentially squeeze into Aggro Shaman as well. In the past, that deck really struggled to find a second 1-drop, aside from Tunnel Trog, and even resorted to things like Dire Mole or Fireflies, which I think this just outclasses a little bit. So I think it slots into that old school Aggro Shaman if we see a resurgence of that in the near future, and is just generally a good card, comparable to what we saw from Kobold Librarian, where you could just kind of squeeze it into certain decks as an early game play and feel pretty good about it. As I mentioned earlier, Murloc Shaman did get some additional support in Scargill and Underbelly Angler, as well as Toxfin, so I think that could be a more viable archetype after the expansion hits. Next up, at number 4, we have Fel Lord Bet Rogue. This is an 8-mana 5/7 that reads, when you draw a minion, summon a copy with Rush that dies at the end of turn. Now this is a super greedy card, and not something that you want to be paying 8 mana for, but it does have some synergy with Voidcaller and Skull of Minari, which are now both wild exclusive. It does also have some fun interaction with Sense Demons if you can play it after you cheat it out with one of those two cards, in which you're drawing those demons and they're coming immediately into play that you can use them for removal. Critically though, and something that I think is often overlooked with this card, is that it actually applies to any minion. So that means that whatever minion you draw off the top or with life tap is going to get summoned and going to get Rush, and you can use that immediately with removal. It's a little bit greedy, but you might be able to consider squeezing this into an even lock so that you can use that 1-mana tap and hit a giant and smash into a taunt so that you can break through, or either a lethal setup or do swing back the board into your favor. That said, I think it might be a bit of a whiff in Cube Lock, just because you have enough greed in those decks in particular, and you want a very narrow demon pool so that you can burst people down with Gul'dan. That said, it does have some potential in Reno Lock, especially Cruel Warlock. It's pretty much an auto-include there, but I think Mechathune might be able to get good use out of this as well, because if you have this down on the board, you tap into a Mistress of Mixtures, you get to use that Mistress for removal, get the immediate healing, and then you still have the copy in your hand to use for the next turn to set up a Defile or even just play naturally. In summary, this card is admittedly very greedy, but I think it has the potential to work its way into some of the Warlock decks that are already pretty common on ladder. Alright, let's talk about this one. Katrina Muerte is an 8-mana 6/8 that reads, at the end of your turn, summon a friendly minion that died this game. And of course, it's a priest class card. Unfortunately, this fits perfectly in an already established deck, Big Priest. Fortunately, while powerful, I don't think this card is strong enough to shift Big Priest standing in the current metagame. Yes, it's better than Kel'Thuzad because it's a persistent effect, and not quite as win more as KT is, but we're reaching a point where Big Priest is successful right now because it's very balanced. It's really evenly distributed between big minions, minion cheats, resurrect effects, and removal. And you're going to have to sacrifice one of those aspects to work this card into it. I think what's most likely is that people maybe rotate out Ragnaros, because that's potentially the weakest minion in that deck, and slot in Katrina instead, and only time will tell whether or not it's actually more valuable than having Rag shots go to face. I think Rag is better against combo decks specifically, but Katrina might be a little bit stronger against just hard control decks that are looking to remove your stuff, because it allows you to layer more and more threats and eventually exhaust their removal resources. That said, I think the first week or maybe two of the new expansion is going to be overrun with Big Priest running both Katrina and Mass Resurrection. And those decks will be successful because, as I'm going to do, a lot of people tend to play fun, greedy decks the first couple weeks of the expansion, and Big Priest with those specific cards will be able to prey upon them. Now, once things settle down and people realize, yeah, Kingsbane Rogue is still a deck, and aggression is still a viable strategy, I think that Big Priests are going to have to adjust and remove some of those greedy cards, and I don't know if Katrina will remain in the deck, but I think it's certainly possible. Where I think Katrina and Mass Resurrection are going to be extremely powerful is if there are ever specialist tournaments within the Wild format, because you can use those cards in your secondary or tertiary deck, and then slide them in if you get matched up against just a straight control deck like Reno Lock, Reno Mage, that wants to exhaust you of resources and simply can't because of those cards in particular. All in all, I think this is an extremely powerful card. I don't know if it'll change much within Big Priest other than the first week or two, but it's just kind of a bummer to see Big Priest get more tools. At number 2, I have Heckle Bonds. This is a 4-mana 3/8 taunt, but it has the battle cry, your opponent summons a minion from their deck. Now, the combination of the stats and the effect are what make this card really powerful within the Wild format. The stats and cost line up perfectly with a deck like Jade Druid, where they're running Oaken Summons, and you get to cheat this out in situations like when you're facing aggro. You don't have the downside of summoning a minion from their deck. However, where Jade Druid has been struggling right now is in the combo decks that are popping up, especially Mecha'thun Warlock, where they don't have disruption tools in order to beat them, so they just kind of have to out-tempo them and race them down, which isn't always a viable strategy if you don't want to be left with a build that's susceptible to aggression. So this card slides nicely into Jade Druid and gives you the flexibility to not be open to aggro decks, but still have tools to beat those combo decks that are looking to take you out of the game in one turn. I'm not sure yet if this fits in nicely with Reno Fatigue decks, but it is a mech, so you get to strap Ziliax onto it on curve, and a lot of Reno decks are already including Ziliax because it's a good card. It makes sense to have that as a disruption option, as well as a big beefy body to get lifesteal attached to. In a similar vein, I think it's interesting with regard to Odd Warrior, even though it has an even cost. Because it's a mech, you can discover this off of Delivery Drone or Omega Assembly and still have some disruption tools at your disposal, which, again, Odd Warrior is really susceptible to OTK combos, in particular Mecha'thun and Exodia. This can help provide a disruption option other than the Deathlords that they're running now, or in addition to the Deathlords that they're running now. Either way, as more and more combos are introduced into the Wild format, we're going to need more and more disruption tools to be able to play around them, and I'm happy to see that one was included in this set, so that within the format we have some ways to play around those types of win conditions. My number 1 Wild Hearthstone card from Rise of Shadows is Never Surrender. This is a common card, and it is actually a 1-mana Paladin secret that reads, when your opponent casts a spell, give your minions +2 health. Now, the benefit to this card is that it builds very resilient boards, which is something that Paladin used to be susceptible to. That's part of why Sunkeep Harem was such a powerful card, is that it helped build resilient boards, and this does something similar but comes out a lot earlier. With its odd cost and its effect, it does fit nicely into what Odd Paladin is looking to do, and Odd Paladin has been running at least a few secrets from time to time in Avenge and Competitive Spirit. This might take the place of Competitive Spirit and helping, again, keep you on board so that you can land those buffs in the mid-turns. In addition to that, Paladin did get some new secret synergies in Commander Risa and Mysterious Blade. The former may actually slide into a secret-oriented Odd Paladin build, so you can get even more value off of your Avenges, Competitive Spirits, and now Never Surrender. This new secret, as well as some of the supporting cards released with Rise of Shadows, may actually bring back Secret Paladin in the upcoming meta. Cards like Commander Risa, Mysterious Blade, and even Sunreaver Spy may be enough to revitalize this old archetype and bring it back into the current Hearthstone meta. I'm not yet sure that Secret Paladin is going to be stronger than just a straight aggro Paladin or even that aggro Anyfin Paladin, and I don't know if you have the card slots to go aggro Anyfin Secret, just because I tried building Secret Paladin alone, and the card slots are getting really tight in order to fit in all of those different packages that you want to include in aggressive Paladin decks, to the point where, you start being pulled in too many different directions. So I think once things settle, one of those decks will show itself as the clear favorite, but all of them are still going to be relevant in some capacity. Alright, so those are the best cards, but let's get to the fun ones, and these are the ones I'm most excited about for the upcoming expansion. Speaking of fun, if you like crazy Hearthstone decks, I upload daily Wild Hearthstone highlights, so make sure to hit that subscribe button to get notifications of those videos. So these are my favorite cards and the ones that I am most excited about in the new expansion. At number 5, I have Unseen Saboteur. This is a 6-mana 5/6 with the battle cry, your opponent casts a random spell from their hand, targets chosen randomly. Now this is another interesting new mechanic, and those are things that I love in Hearthstone. I've been playing the game for a long time, so anytime something new comes about, I'm all for it. More importantly, as a former mono-black control player in Magic the Gathering, I love making my opponent discard cards. And this is about as close as we can get to discard in Hearthstone, so I'm really looking forward to it. Granted, this is probably not strong enough to see play in a format that has Lotheb, Zihi, Nerubian, Unraveler, but it's just a cool effect, to be honest with you. And I would love to see more of this type of card in the future, maybe with a better body or at a lower cost. Throughout the video, and especially during the best cards, I've talked a little bit about disruption and why that's important for some of the decks that have been popping up, and this card kind of plays into that for any spell-based combo deck. Specifically, it can have some really fun outcomes if you're playing a Mecha'thun Warlock and you hit their Blood Bloom, or even better, their Cataclysm, discard their entire hand, and completely negate their combo. What I like about this card is that it does require you to time it right. You need to have the read that the opponent has one or more of those critical spells in their hand. It's not a card like Skulking Geist where you can just rip it on curve and win the game. I think it's interesting, it's cool, and again, I'm excited for this mechanic because I want it to be successful. I want to see more of it. Speaking of exciting mechanics, my next card is Plot Twist. This is a 2-mana Warlock spell that reads, shuffle your hand into your deck, draw that many cards. And this has some cute interactions with cards like Bet-Rogue and Dollmaster Dorian, where it can summon a whole bunch of minions into play, and in the case of Bet-Rogue, give them rush to crash into opposing minions. But it also just offers some interesting reset options for a deck like Reno Lock that maybe needs to dig for specific answers against specific decks, namely Reno on curve or in a tight spot. I don't know if it's going to be as game-breaking as a lot of people think, just because it is -1 card from hand and -2 mana for that turn. But again, in a deck like Reno Lock that's looking for specific answers, you may be justified in dedicating a card slot to it. Where I'm excited to play this card, though, is a little bit different. I want to combo this with Augmented Elix and potentially both copies of Plot Twist so that I can go infinite, similar to Dead Man's Hand Warrior, and more importantly, have the potential to get multiple copies of Gul'dan in a single game. So again, I don't know if this card is game-breaking, but it's an interesting and cool mechanic, and one that I hope at least sees some play, and I think it has the potential to do so. Coming in at number 3, I have Blastmaster Boom. This is the latest iteration of Dr. Boom, and it's another 7-mana 7/7, but this time it has the battle cry, summon 2 1/1 Boom bots for each bomb in your opponent's deck. This is a really fun callback card to the original. It has the same stat line and a very similar battlecry effect, but it has a new and more modern twist on that old card, which is a really cool way, to be honest, to do a callback card like this. I don't know how consistent this effect will be. It depends a little bit on how viable the new 3-mana minion as well as the weapon Wrench Caliber are, in addition to the previous set's Sephorian Bomber. But I really enjoy interacting with my opponent's deck. In Wild especially, this has an interesting interaction with Reno decks where it could turn off their Reno Jackson or even their Kazakus to put them in a spot where they either have dead cards in hand or aren't able to get full value from them. Most importantly though, I just want to run a triple Dr. Boom deck. I'm going to shove all 3 iterations of Dr. Boom into a single deck and see how quickly I can blow up my opponent's face. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I hope to get a video of that happening very soon for you guys to watch, but honestly, it's just a cool card. Coming in at number 2, I have Hench Clan Burglar. This is a 4-mana 4/3 pirate with Battlecry, discover a spell from another class. And what I like about this card is that it's an exciting new direction for the Burgle mechanic. Somebody that's played a lot of different Burgle nonsense, I can't tell you how frustrating it is to queue into a rogue and have the entirety of your deck just kind of feel pointless. The critical aspect of this card now, however, is that it says from another class, not your opponent's class, so you're not completely helpless when you find yourself matched against a rogue. In addition to this card, Burgle Rogue did get some new support in Vendetta and Underbelly Fence, so it may actually be a relevant archetype in the next set. I don't think it's consistent enough to be top tier or meta, but it might be fun to actually queue up the deck and get some wins from time to time. One last note is that this is a pirate, so it works well with Raiding Party, which I've already been running in my Espionage Rogue, and so this slots nicely into it and helps, again, increase the consistency, even if you're perhaps overpaying for the body that you're getting. So again, not a great card, but it sets a precedent for the Burgle mechanic moving forward, and the devs have already said that this is the direction that they're taking it, so I'm excited for that. Finally, my favorite card of the new expansion is Geppetto Joy Buzz. Geppetto is an 8-mana 6/6, but he has the battle cry, draw 2 minions from your deck, set their attack, health, and most importantly, cost to 1. What I like about this card is that, first of all, he's a gnome, and gnomes are awesome. Second of all, targeted draw like this allows you to really get creative with your deck building to fully take advantage of the effect. Now, obviously, this is a crazy combo enabler, and could even bring back the old Aviana Coon interaction, because you can fetch those 2, reduce their cost to 1, and then get to vomit your hand like you used to. But there are really interesting considerations for this card outside of the Druid class as well. You also have the ability to add Azalina and Togwaggle into any class, because if you just fetch one of them, you have the ability to permanently swap decks with your opponent's class, which I think was always a really cool combo and led to really interesting late game decisions where you could really get an edge on your opponent if you're familiar with them. Another consideration is that he's a quick and easy tutor for Yogg. You know how I love Yogg. I'm looking forward to doing that. If I could get Yogg to stick on my side of the board and alive for any period of time, I might be able to bounce him back to hand and play him again. So be prepared for more Yoggs in the future. Finally, you always have the consideration of Malygos plus a whole lot of burn. You can now do this in a wider range of decks instead of just those decks that can either cheat out the minion or resurrect Malygos in some fashion. Looking ahead to the future of Hearthstone, though, I think this card has the potential to have some combos that we're not even considering right now. That the ability to, again, target very specific cards with your draw, reduce their cost to a point where you shouldn't be allowed to play them on the same turn, has the potential to be broken down the line, and honestly, I like broken things. I'm looking forward to it. Alright, well that's it for me. Those are the cards that I think will be the best in the Wild format, as well as those that I'm most excited about personally. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any cards that you think are going to be broken in the new expansion, make sure to leave those down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.